who are offended by the work of Charles Darwin, the theory of evolution, and especially the term Homo erectus. Yes, some people still don't believe in evolution. Then again, some people still don't believe Elvis is dead. But if we give Darwin his due, if evolution does show where we came from, the question remains, where are we going? Perhaps into my opening credits.
Rising anti-Semitism in Eastern Europe has voted English-only sign. 40,000 tons of armed with PCBs blew up the ozone layer today.
Standing by for solid rocket booster separation.
Greetings, Earthlings. This is Commander Rick. They say when Charles Darwin published The Origin of Species in 1859, it sold out in one day. Since then, the theory of evolution has generated controversy, knowledge, and a lot of great science fiction. H.G. Wells explored the struggle for the survival of the fittest, the dangers of human meddling in evolution, and the use of time travel to witness the process of evolution over the eons. In fact, many of SF's best evolution stories involve time travel. Olaf Stapleton's amazingly ambitious Star Maker features a man traveling 2 billion years into the future to witness the rise and fall of 18 races of humans. In Michael Bishop's Nebula award-winning novel, No Enemy But Time, an African-American time travels back to prehistoric Africa to prove the existence of a missing link. The time traveler discovers a small tribe of early humans and proves their proximity to modern man by fathering a child with one of them. And a while back, I talked to Connie Willis about her plan to use time travel to explore Darwin's work. Connie, I hear that in your upcoming novel, you send a time traveler back to Victorian England so you can write a story about Charles Darwin. Why did you want to write about him?
Darwin is one of my heroes because he was a person of great personal integrity and conscience who, I think he said at one point, I feel as though I have committed a murder when he had Origin of Species published. So he knew full well the impact that this would have on society, and he didn't know what to do about it because it was the truth. And I think that we're undergoing much of that same sort of cultural shock that was happening to the Victorians. With us, it involves more brain chemistry, computers, AI, but we're still dealing with the same issue, which is what is a human and how is a human different from, in his case, the lower animals, in our case, a machine or a bundle of chemicals. And it's real hard to face those things. Man's image keeps getting shifted around and usually, in his eyes, at least, debased. I mean, we're not nearly as important. First we thought we were the center of the universe, then we found out we weren't. That was bad enough. Then we found out we really weren't any different from the lower animals. Then we find out that all these things that we thought of as free will, duty, honor, conscience, love, are nothing but an assortment of chemicals that can be reproduced. And all of this is real hard on us. We have a hard time maintaining our idea of autonomy, and I think it will be fun fun is maybe the wrong word, intriguing and interesting to look at how Victorian England was very much like ourselves.
Darwin's first book was not The Origin of Species. It was On the Voyage of the Beagle, his observations about nature during his 5-year odyssey around the world. A somewhat similar journey was taken by the author of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Douglas Adams. After traveling to the corners of the globe, Adams wrote Last Chance to See, a non-fiction look at species pushed to the verge of extinction, pushed there by Homo sapiens. What do you think of the idea that we are the pinnacle of evolution?
Well, it's simply not the case. I mean, Stephen Jay Gould illustrates this very nicely when he sort of picks out these pictures that we've all seen of, you know, monkey, ape, you know, Homo erectus, Homo habilis, and sort of leading up to Homo sapiens, as if we are somehow the apotheosis, the the point to which evolution has been progressing. Evolution doesn't progress. It simply sort of wanders around in whatever channels it finds to sort of wander in. We see ourselves as being the apex simply because that's where we happen to be looking from. Perspective is a very, very important thing to take into account here.
Let me just zip ahead here, because Douglas told me a wonderful story that shows how the theory of evolution has been misinterpreted over the years.
It's interesting, I mean, how recent, profound misunderstandings are. The disease that we used to call Mongolism and we now call Down syndrome has an interesting origin, and in fact calling it Down syndrome is in many ways as derogatory as Mongolism, because Dr. Downs, who was a Victorian doctor, was a major proponent of the idea that what happens in the womb to a fetus is that it develops through previous stages of human evolution. Now, there's a certain amount of truth to that, but what he thought that other races were previous forms of human evolution before we got to the white Anglo-Saxon. So that if you were born prematurely, you might be a black race. So premature babies thought that arrested development, rather, it was not premature, but arrested development babies were called Mongols because it was thought that they were actually, that Mongolism was, being a Mongol was an earlier form of being a human being. It was an inferior form of human being. So, I mean, it was rightly decided that this is an appallingly sort of racist idea to enshrine in the name of disease. So they named it after the guy who thought this. I think is equally absurd. But anyway.
Darwin's work has been misunderstood from the start. For example, he never claimed humans descended from monkeys. He said humans and monkeys both descended from something that is long gone. But while evolution is now accepted as scientific fact, there's still plenty of debate over which species followed which. For an entertaining look at the fight for supremacy amongst fossil finders, check out Lucy by Donald Johanson and Maitland Eadie, and then read The Making of Mankind by Richard Leakey, a case of survival of the fittest theory. In fact, Nancy, open the line down to Kenya, please. As an anthropologist and paleontologist, Richard Leakey has been a key figure in tracing our family tree to its deepest roots. Dr. Leakey, it's Commander Rick. A science fiction author was telling me that evolution doesn't progress, it sort of wanders around. How strong a role do you feel chance plays in evolution?
I think very strong indeed. There is this idea that humans are here because it was preordained, or that all evolution was ultimately geared to producing us, and that there was a sort of an inevitable tendency to greater and greater intelligence, which is personified and epitomized by human beings today. We are as much chance as an amoeba. We came about as a result of a series of events and circumstances that occurred in different places, at different times, under different circumstances, and it's perfectly easy to see that there could have been a planet without humans on it. There are humans on it, and we're pretty sure now where the main events took place and under what circumstances, but there was nothing inevitable.
While some science fiction foresees us becoming extinct, a number of stories suggest we could end up branching off into a number of species. Do you think that's likely to happen?
The story of human evolution, there's only one species left. There have been a multitude or complexity of species. I don't think there is any chance there will be another species of humanity. We could become extinct. I think it's very likely we will become extinct, not in our lifetime or not in our foreseeable future. But the extinction of humanity, I think, can almost be taken as a given. And I don't think there will ever be another human. I don't think circumstances would conspire to bring about another organism like ourselves. This is not to say that over time, millions of years, under the right circumstances, you couldn't get another organism that had the capacity to think clearly and conceptualize, but wouldn't be like us.
Right. Now, in Origins Reconsidered, you make passing reference to modern man as Homo technologicus. Has our advanced technology really made us a distinct species?
Well, I think the question there, and it's addressed in the book, is have we not reached a stage where we are so different because of our technology that we're almost looking at a new species in terms of what enables it to survive? What is our adaptation? And our adaptation today is surely cultural, technological, rather than biological. And in one sense, we are very different. That difference, however, is rooted in a biological background, and I think it's more of a fun question than a serious question. But there's no doubt that the differences between us and our closest relatives and the difference between us and our ancestors is not the genes, is not the biology in any strong sense. It is much more the way we think, the way we do things, the way we comprehend things, the way we see ourselves, which is all tied up with technology.
That's true. How much can we really learn about ourselves by examining our biological past?
Well, I think it is clear that by understanding that we have a biological origin that can be documented in evolutionary terms, I think humans can get a better perception of what they actually are. I think we can get a better understanding of the importance of seeing the oneness of humanity rather than the diversity of humanity. And I think racism and some of the bigotry that's gone over the last few hundred years can be set in a perspective that makes it easier to manage. I think that is important. I think another area that's important is that we have, and I myself have tended to put the future of the planet in our own hands, and I think that's rather egocentric and arrogant, and I think it would be better now to recognize that it's not the future of the planet that's in our hands, it's the future of our species that is in our own hands. And I think we must recognize that our actions today will have a very significant consequence on the future of our species. Now, with it will depend the future of many other species, but it's not the future of the planet. It's the future of the planet, if you like, as we know it now, but the planet will be here regardless of what we do.
Good point. Thanks, Richard. There have been a number of science fiction stories about Homo machino. In Michael Swanwick's story Griffin's Egg, our technology drives us to the verge of extinction. In the story, your character Krishna complains that we're trying to run a technological civilization with a brain that was evolved in the Neolithic. I take it you agree with him.
No question about it. You stop and think how long it took to evolve consciousness. It evolved incredibly rapidly, to evolve intelligence, rather. It evolved incredibly rapidly, probably over the course of a couple of million years, like nothing compared, for what it is. An amazing adaptation, and circumstances have changed in the last 10,000 years, more than they changed in the 4 million years before that, and we're still a couple of million years evolution behind it. We're really not adapted, and it looks like we're going to seize control of our own evolution just out of self-defense, and so we're probably in 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, we will not be recognizably human at all.
Do you worry that we'll make some major mistakes when we take control of evolution and start mucking about with the human brain?
Well, human history sort of suggests that no matter what it is, we'll make some very bad decisions. I find it fascinating because by its very nature, it alters your ability to make decisions, to judge what is proper. At its most crude form, it's like having a drink of alcohol, and you have that drink, and you say, "Should I have another drink?" And because you've had a drink of alcohol, your judgment's a little bit impaired, and you say, "Well, I should have another drink." And then after 4 drinks, you go, "Should I have another drink?" Well, after 2 drinks, you wouldn't have said that, but after 4, you'll say, 5 is fine. And you can just spiral off into, the world's greatest hangover the next day. And it's quite possible the human race will go spiraling off into the greatest hangover of existence with this technology. But it's coming. I think it's important to look at it beforehand and decide what you really want to do with it.
In Stand on Zanzibar, why did you decide to deal with the genetic manipulation of the human embryo and the creation of the next step in our evolution, Homo superior?
Well, it's been a fairly common theme in science fiction. Oh, I suppose since about the middle of the last century, when Darwinian evolution first became seriously accepted. The notion that we ourselves are subject to an evolutionary process was the raw material for a great many stories, of which I think my favorite was Theodore Sturgeon's Maturity, many years ago, in which, you know, the theory that we are actually retarded apes. That's why we're not hairy, why we're not muscular, and so on. And here's this guy who's a genius, but very retarded, who is given treatment to advance him physically, and he becomes a very, very lonely, mature human being, rather like a bull gorilla, unable to socialize because he no longer belongs, in effect, to the same species as the rest of us. Terrifying story, that. But from my own point of view, essentially I've used the notion of people with additional powers, superior intelligence, superior vision, that kind of thing, basically to talk about responsibility. I think, yes, I'm sure that has come into every story that I've written about people with superior talents.
In your novel Schismatrix, humans have bioengineered themselves into a number of species better suited for life in space habitats. Why are you fascinated by where evolution might lead us?
I just like the idea of post-humanism, you know. I like the idea of human, I mean, that's what evolution means. It means becoming another species, doesn't it? And that means that our species becomes like a historical relic. You know, in writing Schismatrix and Crystal Express and those Shaper Mechanist stories, it had finally occurred to me that everything that had been written about settling space was wrong, and that space really was an unnatural environment, and that it was going to require an unnatural effort from unnatural people to prosper there. Now, the idea, the sort of the Asimov notion of settling the galaxy, and there's like 200,000 civilized planets and 48 quintillion human beings, and they're all walking around looking just like you or I just can no longer swallow that. You know, I mean, it's clear that there are technologies now. We're learning to hack the nervous system, hack the human DNA. I mean, this knowledge is not going to be left to rot. It's going to be put to use. You know, the only question is by whom and to what ends. And when it is put to use, it means the end of the human condition.
Hacking our DNA to produce new species is not a new theme in science fiction, but how realistic is it? In his book, Mapping the Code, author Joel Davis examines the Human Genome Project, the huge international research effort to blueprint our DNA. It's already made headlines by identifying the faulty genes that cause Huntington's disease and cystic fibrosis. Anyway, a while back, I talked to Joel about the potential of genetically engineering evolution. Joel, how will the Human Genome Project give us clues about our evolution?
That is a very interesting question, actually, because we know that different species lie in at different levels of the evolutionary ladder. We're able to compare the genomes of different species and see how they've changed through time, through geologic time. Knowing that and knowing the entire code for the human genome, we can begin comparing that with chimpanzee genome, for example, mice genomes, and so on, and learn how, evolutionarily speaking, the genetic code has changed through time. That can give us some very valuable information on about why we are who we are today, what caused the human species to become as we are today.
Will the Genome Project give us the knowledge to shape the human evolutionary path?
It's way too early to talk about something like that. Even when we have the actual physical sequence of the genetic code, then it's a question of trying to figure out what the different DNA sequences code for. And then that's a whole different kettle of fish to even talk about, you know, directing future evolution from knowing the human genome. It's way, way too early to talk about that.
Of course, it's never too early for science fiction to talk about anything. While British biologist Thomas Huxley was one of Charles Darwin's staunchest supporters, his grandson, Aldous Huxley, warned against genetic engineering in his 1930 novel Brave New World, where humans are bred to be either gammas, alphas, or betas. Falling Free by Lois McMaster Bujold asks, what if you're a beta and everyone switches to VHS? But for the ultimate in engineering specialized species, check out Walter John Williams' bizarre and bittersweet story, Dinosaurs. What's the biggest change that genetic engineering has made to the human race in your story, Dinosaurs?
Well, this is taking place millions of years in the future, quite literally. And essentially what's happened is that the human race has got very large and very specialized in their own particular niche. So if they need a diplomat, they just breed one from the pool of diplomats that they have. Or if they need a gardener, then they have a specially formed human that does that task. And what some of my other work is concerned with is the possibility that breeding people for specific purposes which then become obsolete. For instance, if you need a whole lot of warriors in a hurry, you can do some test tube warriors that are really mean and really well equipped for personal survival and combat and so on. But then once the war is over, these people have become redundant, and you've got to find something else to do with them. So that's one obvious danger, is that you might be breeding people for some particular ecological or social niche that will no longer exist by the time they reach maturity, or that will no longer exist once they perform the particular function you've designed them for.
While Walter John Williams explored humans evolving to resemble dinosaurs, others have hypothesized dinosaurs evolving to resemble humans. The New Dinosaurs by Dougal Dixon features a menagerie of creatures that might have evolved had the great lizards not gone extinct. In his West of Eden series, Harry Harrison rewrites Earth's history to eliminate the killer comet and pit intelligent dinos against humans for survival of the fittest. Robert Sawyer transplanted Earth's dinosaurs in order to allow them to continue up the evolutionary ladder. Nancy, open a line to Toronto, please. In Sawyer's Quintaglio trilogy, a planet of dinosaur species is dominated by the intelligent Quintaglios, which are based on a real dinosaur, the Nanotyrannus. Rob, it's Rick. In your second Quintaglio book, Fossil Hunter, why did you use Charles Darwin's trip to the Galapagos Islands, which inspired The Origin of Species, as the template for your character's adventures?
What I was trying to do with the whole Quintaglio series was trying to make clear to people that some of the principles of science that people don't seem to understand about the way evolution works, for instance, are really very simple and can be explained in a straightforward way. You mentioned The Origin of the Species by Darwin. Very few people today have actually read that book. So I thought, well, here's an opportunity to illustrate in an exciting action-adventure context some of the things that Darwin had to say about how we got to be who we are. And I think that's what was much more my agenda, was simply to say, hey, this is how evolution works. And it really does work, and that's why you and I are sitting here today.
Now, you included this ethereal entity, the Watcher, who has influenced the Quintaglio's evolution. It reminded me of other novels about alien intervention in our evolution, like 2001 by Arthur C. Clarke and Waiting for the Galactic Bus by Park Godwin. Why is this such a recurring theme in SF?
I think it's a recurring theme because of the principle of personal bafflement. When you look at evolution, you say, wow, I can't see how I could have possibly gotten here from a slime mold. There had to be some sort of guiding intervention. The problem with that, and I was having fun with it in Fossil Hunter, but the problem with that is it betrays an incredible misunderstanding of evolution. Evolution is only baffling and astonishing if you say, here's slime mold and here's Commander Rick. Okay, bad example. Here's slime mold and here's the average human being.
Right.
How do you get from A to B? And it boggles the mind. But if you show 100 billion generations between the slime mold and the average human being, then it's not baffling at all. It makes perfect sense. But the mind doesn't grasp evolution that way because we just can't perceive billions of years of time and millions of generations. And so we keep saying, I still am boggled and have a mental block on going from slime mold to human being. We have to have somebody in there guiding it. And so we invoke the alien into the operation.
Right. Now, in Hobson's Choice, your SF murder mystery, thanks for emailing me the manuscript, by the way, You seem to be suggesting that manipulating our own evolution would be dangerous.
I do think it's dangerous only because evolution is a process that works on a huge time frame, and we as human beings are notoriously bad at planning for the winter after next. So we just don't have the mindset to think in generational terms as a race. We simply do not do it. But in Hobson's Choice, which is a story in part about marital breakup, which is something that science fiction doesn't normally deal with, I do have some artificial intelligences contriving to create a genetic algorithm other than the one that governs you and me. The one that governs you and me is, let's scatter our seed as widely as possible. That's the best way to ensure survival of our own genetic material into the next generation. And that is the genetic basis for philandering and adultery and all these sort of things that have made human life a miserable existence in some ways. So one of the sub-themes of Hobson's Choice is, can you develop a genetic algorithm that wouldn't work that way, where in fact survival was best based on lifetime pair bonding? So what I was trying to do there was make a very interesting point that a lot of what we are is the unfortunate byproduct of evolution being a random sort of event. If you could direct it, you could do some interesting things, but not everybody would agree that these are the interesting things. Hugh Hefner would be the last man in the world to say this was an improvement, to have a whole bunch of people who had eyes only for their spouse for the rest of creation. He would be out of business. Not everybody agrees on the agenda.
And yet when I read, say, The Inheritors by William Golding, I'm reminded of the brutality of natural selection. Do we want to control evolution because it's such a cruel process?
See, this is where, again, we talked a little bit about the need to impose aliens or God on devolution. Evolution is not a cruel process. It is quite literally a heartless process. There is no emotional content and no moral judgment going on in evolution. Evolution is simply a response of a population of beings to changes in its environment. And it seems cruel to us, you know, if 100,000 baby turtles die each year so that 2 or 3 will survive. That seems cruel to us, but it's not. It's just the way it works. And one of the great problems with evolution as a concept in our society is that we're always looking for ways to impose a moral agenda on evolution, which is where Nazism and things like that come from. When you say, we can use moral evolution for good or bad, but it's neither. Evolution is completely neutral. It's just about, well, if the environment is this way, who's going to best survive in that environment? And that's not a moral question. That's a biochemical question. That's all evolution is about.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Rob. Well, if it's a biochemical question, perhaps it should remain a biochemical process. I've heard $1.20 that's being spent on the Human Genome Project goes towards studying the moral, legal, and ethical issues of meddling with what we are. Those may prove to be the most important results of the entire enterprise. Can overcome their gag reflex. I'm Enrico Gruen, and this is